Thank you, and good morning to you all. Thank you for being here. I have the hard task to wake you up this morning, and I will start by using this machine, hoping it works. Yes, I would like to remind you what we've been doing yesterday and what is included in this whole project. It's not only a prototype, which we are going to talk about now, but yesterday we started to work on the network of knowledge, the participants, the hubs and the people who could be involved. But there are two other aspects, the prototype, the mechanism, how we're going to work together. That's the green shape here, and I'm going to present that to you today. But keep in mind that there is another aspect that we won't talk too much about, although there is a presentation which encompasses rights, rules and roles. It was not possible to fit all the questions about rights, rules and roles in the prototype itself, but I'm sure you will have plenty of them in your mind while we go through this presentation. But remember that there will be a specific document about that. I will briefly present the challenges we faced when we started this work, and then I will introduce the actors just to get you familiar with the icons that we use in the prototype. And I will then explain the mechanism of knowledge transfer and synthesis to answer the requests that could be asked to the NoK. Let me remind you beforehand that you can have, or maybe some of you already picked up some documents. There is this poster here, and there were some reprints yesterday on the table, registration tables. There are none left this morning, but if you want one of it, just ask Marie or myself, and we'll provide it, or we'll send you a PDF of it if you want. And there is a reprint of the prototype itself. That was, again, available on the table yesterday. It's no longer there, but you can have a reprint of what's going to be presented. My presentation today, I've tried to simplify it even more compared to the document that has been printed, because it's going to be a long day, so I don't want to overwhelm you straight from the start today. We started with some basic paradigms, like we know that there's going to be a need to inform the decision-making process with the best available knowledge. That's the whole point of this NoK, and this NoK, remember that, will be working at the European level. So the best possible understanding of the situation and options allow the decision makers to make the best possible decision. In order to achieve that, the decision maker may want to rely on scientific knowledge, but also on other types of knowledge. So we had to keep that in mind. We need a prototype that allows to include other types of knowledge and not only scientific knowledge. So that's multidisciplinarity of approach, including social sciences. We need to explain the quality, because the decision makers must be able to report why the results are strong and robust, and not only because he has been told by scientists that the results are very nice. And we need this prototype to allow people to make the knowledge base evolve with time, because there will be more research coming in, and so you can't just rely on what has been done in the past, but you want to be able to upgrade what has been done. We also had in mind that we needed to keep the independency and objectivity of the people who would work, because if there is any corruption or if there is any pressure group acting, we want these people to be safe when they are doing this synthesis of knowledge. It's a big challenge for the NoK and eventually for IPBES to be credible in the results that it will provide to the decision makers. To achieve that, you need to rely on several aspects, like transparency, the presence of peer reviewers, and the fact that you can track back what has been done during the work. And last but not least, this needs to be efficient. It's not possible to have a very heavy procedure that will take a lot of time and will cost a lot of money. We also started with a framework. We had, in the initial proposal of this project, were identified a set of actors, like the requesters or clients. We changed the name in the meantime. Requesters are anybody who wants to ask a question to the network of knowledge. A knowledge coordinating body, I will explain the use of this very important body, and working groups who will do the work. And we were limited by, limited, let's say it this way. We were limited by the fact that this synthesis of knowledge would be achieved by using one or several of these three approaches: expert consultation, evidence-based framework, and adaptive management, or what has been renamed participatory learning and doing. So that was the tools, the ingredients of the recipes. We have a cake. We want to make a big cake. We have the ingredients. Now, what is the recipe to make it good? The actors. We have the community of knowledge holders and providers. It has been mentioned yesterday. Potentially, it's anybody on this planet. We all have experience and knowledge. But you have to remember that a question that will be asked to the NoK will probably target a specific topic. So it will be a subset of these community of knowledge holders or computers and databases that will be tackled by each question. That's the network by itself. And you've seen yesterday through Estelle Ballion's presentations and other presentations that we are trying to build on existing networks. Not to try to reach individual people, but rather to rely on hubs and existing platforms and institutions to try to relay the message and get more efficient. From these big community of people, you can have requesters. Obviously, requesters can be governments, institutions, but they are potentially anybody, an NGO, a group of researchers who need to have a question asked to the NoK because they want to benefit from this European scale and a big synthesis. From this network of knowledge, you can also create working groups. Those are the people who will do the work, and you will extract some evaluators because, remember, we've said that it was important to ensure the credibility to have some people peer reviewing the work and having an external and fresh eye on what has been done. And here comes the knowledge coordinating body, and you may see this KCB, as we call it, as the conductor of the orchestra, making the link between the requester and the working groups so that there is no direct interference if it's not needed, but also making sure that everything is working smoothly and according to rules and budgets and all sorts of things. So that we'll see through the presentation how important this KCB can be. The mechanism itself. How does it start? We have three big stages: preparing, conducting, and finalizing. It may look very heavy like that, but it was very important to examine the preparation stage because, based on the experience of several of us, we see how a project can be a failure if it's not well prepared, or it leads to misunderstanding and deception at the end. So it's very important to prepare that as well as possible. The conducting part is the work achieved itself, and then finalizing is getting back to the requester and all the closing up of the project. So you may have been interested in, well, how are they going to do the work? But we are going to go through all these steps because you will see how they can complement each other. So let's have a look at the preparation stage with three steps: the request, the dialogue and scoping, and the tender process. And then you reach the agreement on the team and protocol. Everything starts normally with a request. Someone calls the NoK or sends an email to the network of knowledge with a request. I have a problem, I have a concern, I would like to know what is known about this given topic. I've simplified this slide because here you could imagine that there is a first screening. Some requests may not be suitable for the work of the NoK. For instance, we've acknowledged that the NoK is designed at the European level, so maybe a question that would be a problem posed at the national level would not be examined by the NoK unless it has some kind of input at the European scale. So there is more to say about this slide, but I want to keep it light. What is very important at this stage is to initiate a dialogue and a scoping stage, because you want to know if the NoK wants to know if it's feasible to answer the question of the requester. And to do that, you first want to make sure that, as it has been said yesterday, you understand each other. You understand the expectations, the exact expectations of the requester. You understand the words used. And also, the requester understands what it is all about, what NoK can do, and the jargon and the science behind that eventually. So there is a dialogue initiated between the requester and the knowledge coordinating body to clarify the expectations and the questions of the requester. But also, and there's a group that I haven't mentioned before, there is this scoping group. And this scoping group is a bit different from the KCB because, for instance, you can include some experts like librarians or information managers who are going to look in the literature and on internet for sources of knowledge. So they will get back to the network of knowledge to say, who has some information about this request? Who is available? Who is an expert? Who knows about grey literature or published papers? And obviously, these people will also look at publications and database and all sorts of, websites of institutions to extract grey literature. And they will feed back the knowledge coordinating body and the requester to tell them, well, actually, there are things already. There is some knowledge there. And it takes this form and this format and this quantity. So there is a potential for a synthesis, or there is nothing. That could be the case. Or there is very little knowledge, so maybe you don't want to spend too much time paying a lot of people if the knowledge is very restricted. So it's a feasibility stage at that moment of the dialogue. And through this dialogue, you clarify everything and you get a first feedback about what is there in terms of knowledge and what is feasible. And you reach a final request, which is eventually rephrased. I've skipped a few steps here compared to the prototype, how the prototype is made available on the website. But then, if the final request is very clear with the final expectations and eventually constraints in time and money and types of knowledge, everybody agreed during the brainstorming we had in the past month that there should be a procedure of call for tender. Again, this call for tender will be disseminated to the whole network of knowledge, saying there is this opportunity to gather knowledge and synthesize knowledge to answer this request. Who is interested? And there will be a procedure with proposals and selections. Here I want to send you to the rights, rules and throws documents. We are not talking about how people will be selected, how the proposals will be examined during this very stage of the presentation. You can imagine that a working group has been selected, evaluators have been identified, and the work is now in progress. So the knowledge, we are reaching the second step, the conduct of the synthesis or the analysis. The knowledge is going to be processed, and here we are using several approaches. that I've presented already, but there is also other opportunities. It could evolve to include other methods like modeling and scenario building and all sorts of things. And at the end of this step, the working group will have some results. So let's go a little bit more into details here. Each of the three approaches that we are examining during this CNU project have its own methodology. And I won't go into details here, but I invite you to join the working groups with the case studies, because that's how the case studies will work. Or ask some experts in the room about what is a proper expert consultation, evidence-based methodology or approach, and adaptive management program. What is important is to keep all these stages very transparent and to explain what it is to the requester and the different stakeholders to make sure that everybody understands how it works and what people are doing. And there is something, although all these methodologies may look a little bit different, and something that is important is how do you choose one method rather than the other, or can you mix several methods? Obviously you can, but there is something that is quite obvious at this stage, is the cost. If you have a requester arriving and he wants an answer to his request by a week, and he doesn't have much money to put into that, first you can ask, is it useful to ask the NoK to do such work? But obviously, if it's a fast answer you need, you may go for an expert consultation at the European level, because it's a NoK. But nevertheless, it will take far less time than if you want to do a systematic review, unless one exists already on the topic. So there is a first screening here for the requester, and a need for the requester to be aware of the pros and cons of each approach and the costs and the time needed to use them. So that's back to the dialogue stage. But at this stage, normally the working group knows what kind of approach he will use. And whatever the methodology or approach is used, there is something that should be done across all methodology, that they should all have something in common, which is these different steps. The working group, and that's something a little bit unusual, and that's totally influenced by what you've heard about the Cochrane collaboration yesterday and all the procedures that have been established by the Campbell collaboration and the collaboration for environmental evidence and systematic reviews. And it's very interesting because it makes things very transparent. First, the working group is establishing a draft protocol. It's, to make it short, it's we say what we will do and how we will do it. You make that, you write it down, you explain all the steps. It's very important to feedback to the requester so that the requester can understand what's going to happen. It's not a very strange black box where scientists are doing their own stuff and you don't understand anything. The requester will know exactly how and why it will be done. And this draft protocol is going to be evaluated by peer reviewers. And if you push the exercise forward, you're going to have feedback from the requesters, and you're going to have feedback from stakeholders and feedback from the network of knowledge, like an open consultation, because you want to make sure there is a sort of consensus about what is going to be done, and the fact that it's going to be done in the best possible way, encompassing all the possible knowledge, all the possible methodologies and practices that are held by the knowledge holders. That's a bit unusual, but that's very important, because once you've benefited from these feedbacks and you've improved your protocol, your recipe, it's written. It's written, and then the working group is supposed to work according to this draft protocol. Why is it important? Because if you have a pressure group trying to influence the outcomes of the work, the working group can back up onto this draft protocol to say, I'm sorry, sir or lady, but it has been decided to be that we would work that way, and we would try to synthesize this type of knowledge, and we will use this methodology, so we can't change it. So it gives strength to the working group in case of influence, or in case of lobbying or whatever kind of influence. It's very powerful. And once this protocol has been finalized, then the team is doing the work according to what has been explained in the protocol. So we do what we've said before, or how we've said before. And obviously they get the results, and the results are presented in a draft report, all together with recommendations and also limitations of the exercise. What is also very important to keep in mind is that all along this process you can go back to the requester. You keep the requester informed and the stakeholders informed. And I've experienced that personally with systematic reviews. Sometimes you have a working group facing unexpected problems during the conduct of the work because it's too big, or they are facing data that are a bit strange, whatever. They don't really know what to do with that, or what is the best way to do it. So in this case, you go back to the requester, you put the requester into the loop, and you ask him or her, what do you think? What is your preference? Where would you like to go? Because there is a need for a decision at that point, a strategic decision. So the requester is kept informed all along by the knowledge coordinating body. You don't want the requester to interact directly with the working group, because you want to keep the working group as an independent body of people working their own way. But you want them to explain. So they do the results, they do the work, they reach the results, and they draft a report. And again, this report is going to go through a peer review process. That's the finalizing step of the prototype. That's very familiar to you at that stage, for those of you who are scientists, because you've done an experiment, you have your results, you draft a manuscript, and you submit it to a journal. So that's the normal peer review process of a publication in a scientific journal, exactly the same way, except that the evaluators, and that's why we call them evaluators, may not only be scientists. They may be people who have an insight about economic costs, or policymakers, so that they can not only feedback on the quality of science, which is very important. That's the first line, quality assurance. We want to make sure the analysis has been conducted according to the best standards. There is transparency and upgradability and objectivity of the work on a scientific basis, but you want to go a bit further than that. You want to make sure that those results are useful for the decision makers, not only the requesters, but maybe other people, stakeholders. So is it relevant? Does it make sense? Is it adequate compared to the request? Actionability means, can you put it into practice immediately or not? Do you need more knowledge? Alternative options. Maybe sometimes you have results that are not very straightforward. It's still very mixed, especially in ecology. Very often you have that. So what are the options for the requester? And you go back into a knowledge brokerage exercise at this stage, and you may not be willing to ask the scientists or the working group to do this knowledge brokerage exercise because it requires special skills. So the knowledge coordinating body, altogether with the evaluators, could do this work. And again, you highlight the lifespan of the answer, because some answers are robust enough to have a long lifespan. Nobody questions about the fact that the Earth is round anymore, but others may be very short-term answers, and you want the requester to be aware of that, because if in 5 years' time this person is still using this synthesis, it may be totally out of date. So raising awareness of the stakeholders, the NoK, and all the requesters about that is very important. Also to anticipate upgrading of this knowledge synthesis. After this evaluation, like for a scientific paper, the the draft report is revised, is improved, and you reach the final report where everybody has finished to work and everybody is reasonably happy, normally. And then there is a dissemination stage, which will be very important also at this stage, because you want this work to be useful to the greatest numbers. So the dissemination, here again we go back to rights, rules and roles and mechanisms that are not strictly the knowledge synthesis. How do you disseminate? Different tools are made available nowadays. But also something that should be anticipated is to try to collect feedback from users. Was this work useful? How did you use it? Very often you don't have this kind of feedback from the policymakers or decision makers. Your results are going in this world and you don't know exactly what they do with it, or you lose track how they use it. So that would be interesting also to anticipate that. And the feedbacks obviously can come from the requester himself or herself, but also from the NoK. Was that interesting? Was that useful to other people than the requester? Oops. Again, all that is very, very summarized on this poster and reprints that are made available to you on request if you haven't had a chance to pick one yesterday. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and obviously I'm eager to take on questions if there are any, or many, as usual. Thank you.